Hey guys, so I'm going to make another quick little video. I wanted to break out my little headpiece today, necklace slash headband, because I'm going to be talking about the movie Black Panther in this video today. And I'm very excited, very prideful, African prideful, culturally prideful after watching this movie. So I went Sunday evening to see it, late Sunday afternoon, early evening. And I loved it. It was one of the best movies I ever seen. It was really good. But the thing that struck me the most, that got me the most excited, is because I was able to point out a lot of the different African influences. Some that I recognized on my own, and then some that I realized after doing a little research before posting this video. But for me, what stood out the most was that there was a lot of South African and West African ties that I thought was very interesting. So hence my little Zulu headband today. I'm feeling myself. But anyway, so I made a little list and I want to get everything out. I don't want to forget nothing. But I'm going to make a couple of points about what I thought was interesting and give my review of the movie. So first of all, like I said, the movie was great. It was excellent. I love the graphics. That was the main thing that I went there to see it for. And I actually ended up really, really loving it. Another key thing that I love the most about the movie is that there was this constant parallel between Africans, and then the African Americans that were scattered abroad. In this case, particularly America, not just, we were scattered everywhere, but just in the movie, in this case, particularly the focus on African Americans, the relationship between Africans, so-called Africans and African Americans, and that kinship that we have, even though there's a great divide, a great distance, not just geographically, but culturally, and just how we see each other. There's a lot of divide. And so also I want to point out that I know there are a lot of people that, are of the Hebrew persuasion and whatnot, that don't like Africans. I've come across that. I've kind of seen that a few times. That kind of is perplexing to me. I don't understand how you can't, and I get, they don't like the Hamitic or whatever because of their hand in selling us, or at least some of them, their hand in selling us. But at the same time, a lot of our people are still in that land, and you can't call everyone that's in Africa an African or a Hamite, because that's not true. Especially sub-Saharan, a lot of our people, most of the population, sub-Saharan, is probably more than likely of Hebrew Israelite origin. They may not know it, and then others do know. So anyway, I am one that definitely embraces the cultures there that's of Israelite origin, and this is exactly why I wanted to get into this video, because that's what I noticed. So we all know that West Africa was one of the key places where our people fled after the Roman massacre. 70 AD, the transatlantic slave trade picked up from the coast of West Africa. But also we went down south, and some people may not believe that people in South Africa are Israelites. I personally believe that, and I respect everyone's decisions, but this is, what I believe. So the thing that I noticed the most in the video, that there was a lot of South African tie that stood out to me. And even from the language, the people in the movie, they had their own, it sounded like it was a made-up language, but it was definitely inspired by South African dialects. It was one of the click languages, so a lot of the Xhosa speak those languages, some of the Damara, I think some Khoi, and just the typical, the larger typical. Ndebele, I think, also speaks some of the click languages, but there's a lot of people that speak that click language, but just mostly the larger tribes of South Africa, if not all the tribes actually. Anyway, so I noticed that was in the video. And I also noticed that there were some South African words. Now, I've been studying the Xhosa language and trying to teach it to myself so I can learn it, so that if I go to that region, I can know the language and be able to communicate and so forth, get around. But I know there's one scene where Lupita, her character, is speaking to another character, and she's saying thank you, and she said Nkosi. And so I recognize that word because Nkosi means thank you in Xhosa rather. And so I thought that was pretty interesting. And then also there was another word that I believe Lupita also said herself, and she was saying it to another character, and she said Kumkani. And Kumkani means king in Xhosa. So I was very much intrigued when I heard the language that they were speaking with the clicks, and then also being able to recognize some of the South African hostile words. I thought it was very interesting. And then I also realized that there was a lot of West African ties as well. There's a scene in the beginning of the movie where when we were introduced to Lupita's character, Nakaya, and she's a spy from her country, Wakanda, and she is on a mission where she's capturing or rescuing, I should say rather, some kidnapped girls. And the girls looked exactly like, they were dressed just like the girls that unfortunately were kidnapped during the Boko Haram situation a few years back. And I thought that was interesting. That was the very beginning of the movie when we were first introduced to her character. And I was like, wow, okay, that piqued my interest because, you know, I'm like, hey, there's some West African ties. I knew there was going to be African influences, you know, in the culture, in the country, in the land, and, you know, the way they look and dress, but I didn't expect it to have real life ties. So that was intriguing to me. And so that kind of piqued my interest to pay attention a little bit more. I definitely was not expecting that when I went to go see the movie. The other thing that stood out to me was that there's a scene where we're introduced to Michael B. Jordan's character, and he's in a British museum, and he's looking at African artifacts, and he stumbles across a piece of artifact that was taken from his land, Wakanda. Ironically enough, it was mistaken to be a Nigerian piece. But what's more interesting about that scene is that there are two different pieces of artwork that they show. One's a mask. I think they might be both masks. I don't remember the second one for whatever reason, but there were pieces of artwork, and the one that I remember specifically clearly was the Benin mask from West Africa, and they had that in the movie. So I said, wow, this is right after Lupita's character where she's with the Boko Haram girls, and then we go straight into the museum where we see Michael B. Jordan with the West African Nigerian artwork, and I thought that was interesting. So that was kind of like really making me pay attention even more. And like I said, those are at the beginning of the movie. And then also after doing research into this movie, I came across the fact that there's this in that scene after he's going through, you know, the artwork or whatever, he picks up he picks up this mask that he likes, and it's an Igbo mask. And the research that I found and the article that I found online, I'll leave the links down below in the description box. The mask that he picks up is actually inspired by an Igbo mask. Now, I didn't recognize that when I was watching the video because I didn't know about it, but going back after the fact, I realized that was actually an Igbo mask. So I thought that was pretty interesting as well. Another thing that stood out to me was the plane land. There's a scene where they show the Black Panther, Chadwick Boseman, and he's speaking to his father. There's a couple of scenes actually, and his father is like on a plane land, and it looks exactly like the South African savannah, the plains. And so that was interesting to me too. I was like, okay, I know we're supposed to be set in Africa, but I just really didn't expect to see this many real life ties to it. And then there was a few other things. Let me look at my list real quick. Then when you're introduced to Wakanda, the country, and you go to the land, you see the kingdom that they are, in. And Angela Bassett's character, the Chadwick Boseman, Black Panther's mother, she is introduced to us wearing a Zulu headdress. Now, I immediately picked it up because I love the South African Zulu, culture and so forth, and not just Zulu, but all the South African cultures. I love it. It's very bright, beautiful, bold, and funky. I love it. So I immediately noticed that, and so I was like, wow, okay, this is a Zulu headdress, because it's kind of like the hats that go up and has like the large circle over it. I'll put a picture in here so you guys can see what I'm talking about if you don't know what I'm talking about. And then the tribal elders, they all represented different Bantu tribes that who study Africa, who are familiar with these things, would easily recognize. They had the Himba woman who had the clay locks. They had a South African woman, traditional South African woman. They had, who actually, in doing research, she actually is a South African actress, which I didn't realize that, but I thought that was pretty interesting. They had a Fulani woman, which is the Fulani tribes are found in West Africa. I know they're in Mali, some parts of Nigeria, but in that region, and I believe they're probably more than likely Israelites as well. I have to do a little bit more digging and research into their customs to see if they keep any of the Abrahamic Levitical customs in their culture. But just looking at them, they have more of a Negroid look, and they don't look quite like a Hamite. And even though Hamites are melanated just like us, and they are our brother, you know, Ham and Shem, we do have slightly different features. So that's one of the first things that I look at when I look at a person. I kind of say, okay, you know what, you don't really look too much like a Hamite, you look like a Negroid or a Shemite. So the Fulani, I believe in my heart of hearts, you know, are probably more than likely stemming from Israelite lineage, being that they're West African, they look, you know, Shemitic. But that they had that in the video. Then there was a gentleman that had the plates in the mouth. I'm not so sure if that's a Shemitic tribe or not, the ones that do that. My initial guess would say no. But I'm not really sure. But nonetheless, I love the character. He looked very stunning in the movie. I think there was a Zulu gentleman in there. I can't remember exactly, but I think there was a Zulu gentleman dressed in the Zulu garb, chief garb. What else? They had, I got the South African woman. They had some Maasai references in there as well. I thought the Maasai might have been Israelites simply because of the fact that a lot of their attire is almost identical to the Zulu. And I thought, hey, you know, this is piquing my interest. And I didn't know that they were also in Tanzania. I thought they were all in Kenya. But no, I realized they were in Tanzania, which is in South Africa. So I originally thought that, but in doing some research, I saw that I read somewhere they drink blood from cows at certain times of their culture. I'm not exactly sure, but you know, initially after reading that, my thought is like, they're probably not Hamites. I mean, they're probably not Shemites. They're probably more Hamitic, because we all know that drinking blood is definitely forbidden in our law. If I'm wrong with that, I'm just going off of what I saw online. I did read that somewhere, but if I'm wrong, you guys please forgive me. But anyway, so I did notice that they had the Maasai. I still thought it was beautiful. I liked the way they looked. I mean, the culture is dressed very beautiful. Also, Wakadi, who is a character in the movie, he had on what I originally thought was an Ndebele cloth, and it was very beautiful. It was really nice, of course. It is not the same colors as the Ndebele, because Ndebele are more like colors like this. And I'll try to put pictures in here. And particularly, I think the women wear the cloth that I'm talking about in the Ndebele tribes, but they're more like a color block, very 90s-ish inspired color block feel, where it's like bright blues, reds, and yellows. But it's a cloth, a knit wool cloth that you drape over yourself. So I initially thought that his character wardrobe was inspired from the Ndebele, but in doing research, I realized that it's actually not Ndebele, it's Basotho or Basotho. Forgive me if I'm saying that wrong, but that is still nonetheless a South African tribe. So I thought that was interesting, and I also found in the video, in the link that I'm going to put in the description box below, there is a what's her name? Gosh. The costume designer for the movie, she actually wasn't interviewed, and she was saying how she was inspired to pull inspiration from all over the continent of Africa. There were other things that are pointed out in the article that I didn't even catch myself. There's some Yoruba in there, which leads me to another point that I have to add before I get off this video. There's some Yoruba garbs in there. I think Forrest Whitaker outfit was a Yoruba-inspired traditional piece. There's some Tuaregs, which are found in Northern Africa, I believe, or Northwest Africa. And so it's just a lot of different things that, the wardrobe costume designer pull from. And so I was really excited to read that article after doing research about it, because I was like, my suspicions are correct. I knew I recognized a lot of South African, or a lot of different African inspiration. But going back to the Yoruba, another thing that I noticed is that there was a time where the sister of Black Panther was speaking, and she was talking about the king, and she could have said my father, like my fada, or father, whatever, however they would say in the African accent. But I'm pretty sure I heard her say Oba. And so Oba, I recognize that because it's a Yoruba word and it means king. And so I thought that was interesting too, that they would have these specific West and South African words thrown and incorporated into the language. And the reason why it's so important to me, stood out to me, is because, for one, like I said, I love it. Those of you who watch my videos, most of my ancestral DNA comes from South Africa, particularly the country of Namibia. I do have West Africa, a little bit of Central and East Africa, but most of it, the majority of it, comes from, like the tribal breakdown, it comes from South Africa. But I thought it was very interesting, not to try to make everything about religion. Everything's a Hebrew situation. It's not, but I'm going to call out what I observed. I thought it was very interesting that, this video had a particularly strong influence with Israelite tribes. I'm not saying it was a coincidence. I don't know. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, but I thought it was interesting, especially when you watch the video with those of you who study the scriptures. It might pique your interest the way it piqued mine as well. And then if you watch the end of the movie, you sit through both credits. It's about an extra 10-15 minutes after the movie actually ends. Well, actually, if you sit through the first credit, there are two, but if you sit through the first credit, there's another part that makes me really think about some scriptures and as it relates to Israel. And I'm not going to give it away because I don't want to spoil the movie for anyone that may go and see it. So, but anyway, I thought that was interesting. So, I definitely wanted to put my take on that. And I think I got everything I wanted. And I'm going to leave it at that. So I'll see you guys in the next video, and I hope you have a great day. Shalom, shalom.